After I buried my mother, I returned to the office to find my belongings in trash bags, my name off the door. "You've been replaced," HR said coldly. I didn't reply. Instead, I made one phone call. By noon, chaos hit the entire executive floor when the lilies on my kitchen counter hadn't even wilted when I walked into the building that had once felt like a second home. The automatic doors opened with their familiar hiss, releasing that sterile lemon-scented air that usually calmed me. But that morning, it only made my stomach turn. It had been 5 days since I buried my mother. 5 days since I'd stood in a black dress beside a wooden coffin, pretending to be composed while every part of me wanted to crumble. My mother had been my anchor, my quiet encouragement through 14 years of climbing the corporate ladder, and now she was gone. And I'd returned to the only place I knew how to function. Except as I stepped onto the executive floor, something was wrong. The plaque outside my office, Claire Donovan, Director of Strategic Operations, was gone. In its place was a strip of bare metal, adhesive residue still visible beneath the fluorescent lights. My door was open, and inside 2 janitors were stuffing my things into black trash bags. "What are you doing?" I managed, my voice brittle. One of them froze mid-motion, clutching the framed photo of my mother and me from my desk. "We were told to clear it out." "Ma'am, orders from HR orders." I stepped closer, staring at the pile of my life. Research binders, notebooks, my laptop, even the glass award I'd received last quarter for leading the firm's biggest merger. All dumped together like garbage. A familiar voice spoke behind me. "Claire, you're not supposed to be here yet." I turned. It was Darren, the new head of HR. His tone clipped, rehearsed. The same man who'd sent flowers to my mother's funeral. Cheap ones with the company logo on the card. "I took personal leave," I said quietly. "It was approved." "It was, but things have changed." He gestured toward my dismantled office. "While you were away, the board decided to make some structural adjustments. Your positions have been filled." "Filled?" I repeated, trying to process the word. "By who?" He hesitated. "Ethan Caldwell." Effective immediately, I blinked. Ethan, my former assistant, 26 years old, charming, ambitious, and utterly unqualified to manage the department I built from the ground up. I had mentored him, defended him, even helped him get his MBA. "Ethan," I said softly, "you replaced me with my assistant." Darren's jaw tightened. It wasn't personal. The company needed a fresh approach. A fresh approach. That was their code for cheaper labor and fewer questions. My heart pounded in my chest, every beat echoing the same realization. They had waited until I was grieving, until I was at my weakest to cut me out. My voice shook, but I refused to let it break. "Where's my data, my reports, my laptop?" "All intellectual property has been reassigned to Mr. Caldwell," he said flatly. "You'll receive your severance by mail." Severance. That word stung worse than anything else. 14 years of loyalty reduced to a severance package. For a long moment, I said nothing. Just stood there looking at the bags of my life piled at my feet. The photo of my mother lay face down on top, her smile hidden behind cracked glass. I exhaled slowly and straightened. "All right," I said finally. "I understand." Darren's expression softened, relieved. "I know this is difficult, Claire, but it's best if you don't worry," I interrupted, meeting his gaze. "I won't cause a scene." And I didn't. I simply walked past him, past the curious eyes of coworkers, pretending not to stare. My heels echoed through the corridor, steady and deliberate, even though my legs felt like lead. By the time I reached the parking lot, my hands were trembling so badly I could barely unlock my car. The grief I'd been holding back for days surged upward. Anger, betrayal, disbelief, all tangled together. But beneath the chaos, a single thought formed, calm and precise. They thought I'd break. They didn't know who I was. My mother had always said, "Grace under fire, Claire. That's what sets you apart." I could almost hear her voice as I sat behind the wheel, staring at the glass facade of the building that had discarded me. I wiped my tears, studied my breathing, and opened my phone. Not my lawyer, not yet. There was someone else I needed to call, someone who owed me a favor. When the line connected, a low voice answered. "Claire, I didn't expect to hear from you so soon. They've made a mistake," I said evenly, "and I'm going to need your help correcting it." There was a pause on the other end, then a quiet chuckle. "Understood. How soon?" "Now." I hung up, my reflection faint in the windshield. Tired eyes, pale skin, determination flickering beneath exhaustion. The first rays of sunlight broke through the morning clouds, glinting off the building's glass panels. By noon, the executive floor would be in chaos. They just didn't know it yet. The city was still half asleep when I drove away from the parking lot. I didn't head home. Instead, I pulled into a quiet cafe 2 blocks away, ordered black coffee, and opened my laptop. My hands still shook as I typed the password. The bitterness in my mouth wasn't from the coffee. It was from the humiliation that clung to me like smoke. 14 years of loyalty, and they couldn't even wait until I'd finished mourning my mother. Not an email, not a conversation, not a shred of decency, just trash bags. I clicked through my personal email, searching for a name buried in the past. David Harlow, a client I'd helped years ago during a merger that saved his logistics company from bankruptcy. He'd once told me, "If you ever need something, Claire, call me directly." I won't forget who saved me. I hadn't thought about that line until now. I typed out a brief message. "David, it's Claire Donovan. Something happened at the firm. I need to meet today if possible. It's urgent." Before I could close my laptop, a reply pinged back. "My office is 10 o'clock a.m. Bring everything you've got." I glanced at the clock. 8:42. The phone call I'd made earlier wasn't to a lawyer or to HR. It had been to David's assistant. The man now sat on the board of Arcturus Holdings, one of the firm's biggest clients. If anyone could shake the foundation of the company that betrayed me, it was him. When I arrived at Arcturus Tower, David greeted me personally in the lobby. He looked older than I remembered. Gray hair now where there had been black, but the same sharp, calculating eyes. "Claire," he said, ushering me into his office. "You look like hell. I buried my mother last week." I replied quietly. "And this morning I lost my job." He frowned, gesturing for me to sit. "What happened?" I told him everything. How I returned to find my name gone, my files reassigned, my position handed to Ethan Caldwell. I didn't cry. I simply laid out the facts the way I used to present quarterly reports. Concise, methodical, controlled. When I finished, he leaned back in his chair. "Caldwell, you said. That name rings a bell. He was my assistant." Barely 2 years out of school, David opened his laptop and typed rapidly. "Interesting, because the same Caldwell reached out to us last week, wanted to renegotiate the contract on your merger project. Said he'd be our new point of contact moving forward." I blinked. "That project isn't even finalized yet." "The confidentiality clauses, exactly." He turned the screen toward me. He already sent a proposal, with revisions that would cost us an extra $3 million annually. My stomach dropped. He's trying to exploit the client base I built. David smiled coldly. "Then maybe it's time your old company learns what loyalty looks like." He made a call short and clipped. "Put all current negotiations with Donovan and Pierce on hold. Tell the partners we're reviewing irregularities in their contract handling and Claire. You'll come in as our independent consultant during this review." I stared at him. "You're serious?" "Dead serious." He said, "If Caldwell wants to play executive, let's see how he handles the fallout." Something inside me shifted. Then, for the first time in days, the fog of grief and exhaustion cleared. My mother used to say, "Don't fight anger with noise. Fight it with precision." I finally understood what she meant. By the time I left Arcturus, the sun was high. My inbox had already started to fill with forwarded emails from David's team. The review announcement was spreading quickly. By noon, it would reach Donovan and Pierce's executive floor. The same people who had thrown my name away like trash. I parked near the river, opened my laptop again, and watched the dominoes begin to fall. Within an hour, messages leaked to the press contacts, still saved in my old email chain. Headlines started to form. Major client suspends $60 million contract with Donovan and Pierce, pending internal audit. I imagined the panic in the boardroom. The CFO pacing Darren, calling emergency meetings. Ethan tried to explain why their biggest client had suddenly gone silent. My phone buzzed. It was an unknown number. "Claire," the voice was hesitant. "Ethan, what do you want?" I said flatly. "They're saying Arcturus pulled their account because of me. Did you talk to them?" I looked out over the water, the current dark and steady. "Ethan," I said quietly, "you made your choice." "Please, Claire. I didn't know they were letting you go. HR said you weren't coming back, that you'd resigned." I almost laughed, resigned. "Then you should have asked me yourself," I said, and ended the call. As the phone screen dimmed, I felt a strange calm settle over me. Not vengeance, exactly. Clarity. They'd taken my job while I was mourning. Now I'd taken their stability while they were celebrating. By noon, as I promised, chaos hit the entire executive floor. And it was only the beginning. By the next morning, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Texts, missed calls, unknown numbers. I sat at my kitchen table in the same black dress I'd worn to my mother's funeral. Cold coffee untouched beside me. The city was waking up again, but for the people at Donovan and Pierce, the morning was chaos. The first news headline hit before 8 a.m. Arcturus Holdings freezes $60 million contract pending audit over possible mismanagement. By 9 o'clock a.m., two more appeared mentioning a senior-level shakeup and possible misconduct within strategic operations. I hadn't leaked anything. I didn't have to. The story had legs of its own. Still, I didn't feel triumphant. Not yet. I wasn't after revenge for the sake of revenge. I just wanted the truth out. My laptop pinged with a message from David Harlow. It's working. Their PR team reached out. Expect contact soon. He wasn't wrong. At 9:26, my phone rang again. This time, the caller ID displayed Darren Holt, HR Director. I let it ring once before answering. Claire Donovan. A pause. Claire, we need to talk. I could hear the strain in his voice. About what, Darren? The part where you fired me while I was arranging my mother's funeral, or the part where you gave my job to someone half-qualified? He exhaled sharply. No one fired you. There was a misunderstanding. The board assumed you were taking an extended leave. Extended leave? I repeated incredulously. Then why did you remove my name from the door? That was a clerical error. Look, the situation with Arcturus is bad. The partners are asking questions. They need clarity. Then maybe they should have thought about clarity before they gutted the department. He hesitated, lowering his voice. The managing partner wants to meet today. They're offering to bring you back temporarily to help stabilize things. I stared out the window at the gray skyline. The same building that had discarded me now wanted my help. Send me the details, I said. I'll think about it. When I hung up, my pulse was steady, not racing. For the first time in days, I was in control. By noon, I was standing in the lobby of Donovan and Pierce again, wearing a dark blue suit and my mother's pearl earrings. I'd washed away the grief on my face with determination. The receptionist froze when she saw me. Miss Donovan, I didn't realize you were alive. I finished for her with a small smile. Apparently, neither did HR. The elevator ride to the 12th floor felt endless. Every floor that passed reminded me how much of my life had been spent here. Late nights, missed birthdays, endless strategy sessions. I'd built my reputation one client at a time, only to have it erased overnight. When the elevator doors opened, I was met with silence. People whispered as I passed. It was strange walking through the wreckage of what used to be my home turf. Darren was waiting outside the conference room. His tie was crooked, his smile forced. Thank you for coming. Inside, the managing partner, Richard Pierce, sat at the head of the table. A man who'd once toasted my promotion now couldn't even meet my eyes. Claire, he began, voice measured. We seem to have had a miscommunication. I folded my hands on the table. That's one word for it. He cleared his throat. We value your contributions deeply. Unfortunately, some premature administrative actions were taken during your leave. In light of the Arcturus situation, we'd like your assistance in reassuring them that operations remain stable. So, you want me to fix the problem you created? Temporarily, he said, avoiding my stare. You'll of course be compensated. I leaned back, studying them. You replaced me with someone who wasn't ready, stripped my access, and handed over sensitive data to a man who violated client trust. And now you want me to clean it up for you. Darren spoke quickly. We made a mistake. Let's find a solution instead of assigning blame. I almost laughed. Now they wanted to avoid blame. All right, I said finally, surprising them both. I'll help on one condition. Richard glanced up, which is I get full access to the internal correspondence regarding my department. Emails, directives, personnel changes, everything from the past 60 days, Darren frowned. That's confidential information. So was my termination, I said evenly. You want me to fix your crisis? I need transparency. They exchanged uneasy glances. Then Richard nodded. Fine. You'll have temporary reinstatement as a consultant. As I stood, I added quietly. And Darren, make sure my name is back on the door before the end of the day. He swallowed, of course. By late afternoon, I was back in my office, or rather what had once been my office. My nameplate had been reinstalled hastily. My shelves were half empty, and the faint scent of cleaning solution lingered. I powered up the computer they'd assigned me and started digging through the internal archives. Most files were routine. Project updates, expense reports, but buried in a folder labeled Operations Transition, I found something that made my heart stop. A memo dated 2 weeks before my mother's death. Subject line, Strategic Realignment. Proposal to replace C. Donovan, the sender, Darren Hall, the recipient, Richard Pierce, and CC'd at the bottom, Ethan Caldwell. My hand froze on the mouse. They hadn't acted during my leave. They'd planned it. I exhaled slowly, the familiar calm settling back in. They thought reinstating me would save them. But they just handed me the proof I needed to bring everything crashing down. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my mother's handwriting on the sympathy cards piled on my kitchen table. She used to tell me, "The truth always leaves footprints, Claire. You just have to look close enough." So I looked. By midnight, my apartment floor was covered with printouts, memos, and screenshots. The deeper I went, the clearer it became. My removal hadn't been spontaneous. It was a carefully executed move, timed to my mother's illness and funeral. The memo I'd found earlier wasn't the only one. There were emails between Darren and Richard discussing succession strategy, referencing Ethan as a cost-effective replacement. One note read, "She's emotionally compromised. Best to act while she's distracted with family matters." I stared at those words for a long time, the cursor blinking beside them. Emotionally compromised. That was their justification for gutting my career. I didn't cry. I just started building a timeline. From what I could piece together, Darren had convinced the board that I'd been planning to resign. Ethan was positioned as my successor, trained quietly in the background. Once I took personal leave for my mother's final weeks, they moved fast, reassigning my clients, removing my name, and rewriting internal reports to show voluntary transition. By the time I returned, I'd already been erased. But what they hadn't counted on was my access. As a consultant, I had full clearance again, something they'd never thought through in their panic to fix the Arcturus fallout. At 2 a.m., I plugged in an old flash drive labeled Client Archive 2018 and began cross-referencing files. That's when I found the anomaly. One client account, Redbridge Technologies, listed under both my department and Ethan, had duplicate invoices, altered signatures, and payment trails that didn't match. Someone had been double billing under my credentials. I checked the timestamps. The falsified invoices had been created the week of my mother's funeral. Whoever had done it assumed I'd never see them. My pulse quickened. This wasn't just internal betrayal. It was a fraud. The next morning, I arrived at the office before sunrise. The building was eerily quiet. Security lights reflected off the polished floor, and the faint hum of servers filled the air. I made it straight from my office, locked the door, and started printing evidence. Emails, invoices, digital trails, all of it. At 8:05, there was a knock. "Come in," I said without looking up. It was Ethan. He looked exhausted, dark circles under his eyes, his usual arrogance replaced by panic. "Claire, we need to talk," he said, shutting the door behind him. "About what?" I asked, still typing. He hesitated. "I didn't know they were going to push you out like that. I thought you'd resigned." I cut in, glancing up. "Yes, I've heard the story." He rubbed the back of his neck. "They told me it was temporary, that you wanted to step back. I swear I didn't mean for any of this to happen." I studied him for a moment. His voice cracked slightly, and for the first time, I believed he was telling the truth, at least partially. "Then why did you approve duplicate invoices under my name?" I asked quietly. He froze. "What?" "Redbridge Technologies. 2 billing streams. One under my credentials, one under yours, same deliverables, same dates." His face drained of color. "I didn't, Claire, I didn't do that." "Then who did?" He swallowed hard. "Darren, he said it was to smooth things over while transitioning accounts. He handled the invoices himself and you didn't question it." I didn't think I could. For a long moment, I said nothing. Then I slid a folder across the desk. Inside was a printed copy of the memo that recommended my removal. Ethan stared at it like it was a live wire. "You were a pawn," I said softly, "but pawns still leave trails." He looked up, guilt and fear battling in his eyes. What are you going to do? What I should have done weeks ago. I stood, gathering the printed documents into a neat stack. There's a compliance officer who handles fraud audits. You're going to call her and tell her everything. Then you're going to CC me, Claire. If you cooperate, I'll tell them you were manipulated. If you don't, I met his eyes. You'll go down with them. He hesitated, then nodded. I'll make the call. As he left, I finally let myself breathe. My hands were shaking, not from fear, but from the adrenaline of clarity. I forwarded every file I'd found to a secure drive labeled Mother. It was strange, but I felt like she was watching somehow, urging me to see it through. By 10 o'clock, the compliance department had the documents. By 11, an internal investigation was officially opened. And by noon, the whispers started. People avoided Darren in the hallway. The managing partner canceled his lunch meetings. Something was happening behind closed doors, and I was at the center of it. I looked at the office door that once carried my name and thought of my mother's voice again. The truth leaves footprints, and I had just shown them where to look. By Friday morning, the entire building hummed with unease. Conversations stopped when I walked past. Doors that were once left open were now half-closed, muffling hurried whispers. The internal investigation had been announced late the previous night, and the email had sent shock waves through the firm. Subject: Compliance Audit Confidential. It stated that all senior staff were to cooperate fully with auditors regarding potential irregularities in client billing and departmental transitions. Darren hadn't shown up that morning. His assistant claimed he was working remotely. Everyone knew what that meant. At 9:30, I was summoned to the main conference room. The managing partner, Richard Pierce, sat at the head of the table, looking like he hadn't slept. Across from him were two compliance officers from headquarters and Ethan, visibly nervous but present. Miss Donovan, one of the auditors, began. "Thank you for coming. We understand you've been assisting with internal clarifications." I nodded. "Yes, I've provided documentation of inconsistencies I discovered after my reinstatement." Richard leaned forward, clasping his hands. "Claire, this situation has gotten out of control. We need to resolve it quietly before it damages the firm's reputation." I met his gaze. "You mean before it damages your reputation?" He exhaled slowly. "If certain documents were misunderstood or mishandled, we can deal with it internally. There's no need to escalate." I pulled a folder from my bag and placed it on the table. "These are the signed invoices sent to Redbridge Technologies under my name while I was on bereavement leave. The timestamps placed their creation the same week I buried my mother." The auditors exchanged a look. "Who had access to your credentials during that period?" "Darren Hall," I replied. "He initiated the transition and approved the payments." Ethan spoke up, his voice trembling. "He told me it was authorized by Richard." Richard turned sharply. "That's absurd." The younger auditor raised an eyebrow. "We'll verify authorization records in the system logs." Silence filled the room, thick and uncomfortable. I watched Richard's expression falter as he realized the tide had shifted. Then one of the auditor's phones buzzed. She stepped outside to answer it and returned moments later, her expression unreadable. "That was headquarters," she said. "They've just received confirmation from finance. Multiple transfers were made to a private account linked to a shell company under Darren Holt's name. Mr. Pierce, those transactions were signed off under your login credentials." The color drained from Richard's face. "That's impossible. He must have forged. Your credentials required biometric verification." The auditor cut in quietly. The room went still. Ethan looked like he might be sick. I said nothing, just folded my hands on the table. Finally, I spoke. "You let them remove me because you thought I was a liability. Grieving, distracted, easy to replace. And while you congratulated yourselves for being efficient, your HR director was bleeding money out of the firm right under your nose." Richard's voice cracked. "Claire, you don't understand." "I understand perfectly." I interrupted. "You built a culture that rewarded convenience over integrity. You made my grief your opportunity, and now it's your downfall." The auditors stood. "Effective immediately, both Mr. Pierce and Mr. Holt are suspended pending legal review." "Miss Donovan, your cooperation has been instrumental in uncovering this." They gathered their files and left the room, leaving behind a heavy silence. Richard slumped in his chair, defeated. Ethan stared at the table, pale and shaken. I rose quietly. "I'll be leaving my badge at reception." I said, "My work here is done." Ethan looked up. "Claire, I'm sorry." "I know," I said softly. "Make sure you learn from this. Ambition means nothing without conscience." As I walked down the corridor for the last time, staff members looked up from their desks, eyes wide with unspoken questions. No one said a word. I didn't need them to. Outside, the crisp March air filled my lungs. The same city that had once felt suffocating now felt wide open. My phone buzzed with a message from David Harlow. "Arcturus reinstated the contract under your consulting company's name. Congratulations, Director Donovan." I stared at the message for a moment, the reality sinking in. I had my independence back, not as an employee but as an equal. I drove straight to the cemetery. The lilies on my mother's grave had begun to wilt, their edges curling brown in the wind. I replaced them with fresh white ones and knelt beside the headstone. "Mom," I whispered, "you were right. The truth does leave footprints." For a long while I just sat there, letting the quiet settle around me. Not as revenge, not as triumph, but as closure. When I finally stood to leave, I felt lighter, like the version of me who'd walked into that office a week ago had been buried alongside the past. As I reached the car, my phone rang again. It was one of the compliance officers. "Miss Donovan, we've completed the initial review. Headquarters is offering you the position of Regional Director for Compliance and Ethics. They said your integrity saved the firm." For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then I smiled faintly. "Tell them I'll think about it." I ended the call and looked out over the horizon where the morning light touched everything gold. My mother's words echoed once more in my mind. "Grace under fire, Claire, that's what sets you apart." She was right. In the end, I didn't need to shout, threaten, or destroy. I'd simply shown them the truth and let it do the rest.